Friday, April 5th, 2024. I'm Michelle Susberry Hill along with my husband, Anthony Hill. Today we are interviewing Mrs. Doris Jeanette Huelsebusch. We are here in person with her at her home in Grange, Texas. This interview is in cooperation with the Fayette County Historical Commission and part of an oral history collection that preserves the history of individuals, families, and culture and important events in Fayette County, Texas. We are very excited to talk with Mrs. Huelsebusch today and share with you some of that history. And now we will start the conversation with our special guest. Mrs. Huelsebusch, let's start off with when and where you were born, and along with what your friends and family, school friends call you.
Right. I was born on December 13th, 1933. Just west of LaGrange. It was a home birth. There was a midwife who came and delivered me. My mother named me Doris Jeanette Huelsebusch, or Schneider rather. I was Schneider. And so on, and as time went on, I guess at my christening or somewhere in between there, my grandmother did not like the name Doris, and so my family started calling me Jeanette. And then I was baptized on Christmas Day, 1933, by the Reverend A.E. Mabus at Trinity Hill Lutheran Church, and that was just about a mile and a half. It was on what we call the Old Plum Highway now. It seems I've forgotten something in between there.
And what were your parents' names and your grandmother and siblings?
All right. I was the oldest child. My father's name was Walter Snyder. My mother was Pauline Reinhardt Snyder. And they were lived in Lee County. And my parents came, after when they got married, they moved to Fayette County. My father lived in the parts of Lee County. Their agriculture was mostly stock raising and things like that, and they had some agricultural land, and I think he did some butchering and so on, and different odd jobs and so on. But then, so then when they married, they came to Fayette County, and we lived down what we call Golden Valley Lane. Now we lived at the end. It was a large property. They were sharecroppers there, and there were probably, I'm thinking, about 7 family units who lived on that space of land, and you know, everybody had their horses and mules and so on, and we shared a pasture for the cattle. Everybody had a sort of 4-room house about this is what it was. It was not sealed. We kept it. We'd get cardboard boxes to provide some insulation to the house, but it was very cold, and we wore a lot of long underwear in the wintertime. It kept the heater going. As a child, I had numerous incidents with allergies, or I guess sinus and colds and so on. So I was hospitalized as a child at least twice, and that you know, I guess it was kind of an ordeal for my parents. And then it was also when I was 6 years old, I had an appendectomy, emergency appendectomy. I was having symptoms all day long, and in the evening when my dad came home, he took me to see the doctor, Dr. Frank Ginther, and they kept me there right away, would not let me go home. And later on that evening, they had performed the surgery. And at that time, everybody had to be staying in bed. You could not get up after an appendectomy, so they had my grandmother come and stay with me in the daytime, so I wouldn't, you know, venture out. And someone brought a book of nursery rhymes and the things of that nature, counting and whatever it was. It was a thick book, and I sort of feel like that was my kindergarten graduate experience, because otherwise our family was busy working. Aside from a few things, you didn't learn to read or do anything as a child, so that was my kindergarten experience. But I learned all my nursery rhymes and the count and all kinds of silly things. So that was
Okay.
that, and that was my unique experience. I have a brother who was born 4 years later in 1937. And then I had another brother born in about 1948. Um, the older brother is still living. The younger brother died in an accident about 1996, somewhere along in there. My father, and as far as the history goes, my father died in an accident in 1968. My grandparents were, I had to think about my grandfather's, Schneider's name. Well, it'd have to come back to me, but anyway, it was, my grandmother's name was Emma Doobie Schneider, and on my mother's side they were Ben and Bertha Reinhardt, and my grandmother there her maiden name was Fisher, and they were all from Lee County. My grandparents on my father's side immigrated on the Ben Nevis in 1854. They settled around in Lee County and serving in the Warda area, and my maternal grandparents came to Texas in the mid-1880s. There was a large German migration at that time too, but they were all Wends. They had this, which is an ethnic group of people. They had to learn how to speak German when they got here. Wendish is a Slavic language. It's much like Czech, like the Czech language.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about your childhood and your earliest memories. I know you mentioned going to the hospital. Maybe talk a little bit about the stay there, if they gave you medicine or if you remember anything about that. And then the games that you played and the people that you were around when you would play games here in Fayette County.
Okay. Well, in my early childhood, as I said, I had also had an accident, scalded my leg, and so I remember that incident too, and so on. That they put some covering on the open wound, and while I was in the hospital with the pneumonia, they used heat to treat the pneumonia. I remember being warm pads, but not much more than that, because I was, just very young at that time and so on. But and I guess as time went on, I know, I was an only child there, so there probably were not many games. I remember just a lot of things. I guess I followed my father around a whole lot, and at that time while he had working horses, they needed to have a horse for transportation, because otherwise, they had a car, but it wasn't utilized that much, and so he had a riding horse, and but she was a rather spirited thing. But I remember riding her and so on, and it was very sad because she developed some kind of a sickness and died and so on, and but the horses and mules, they were used for plowing and so on. And this is getting back to my games and so on. I'd followed my father around a lot, and we had cows, and so he would be milking the cows, and I'd always take my drinking cup along or glass along, so he'd put some milk into it right away. And so I drank a lot of the milk when I was a child. And then we'd always have cats around, and we'd have little bowls for the cats, and so he'd put milk in bowls for the cats. And not too familiar, but I'm sure we had a dog, but I don't recall that. But as I said, we lived tenant farmers just did not have a lot of things and so on, and we had a well that was across the road, and you had to draw water from it and carry it from that well to your house, which was probably, like maybe, it was less than 500 feet, but it was still a good distance, and so you had to have reservoirs to carry this water with you. And so when I think about all this, of course you probably have catch water off of the roof too to supplement that, depending on when it would rain, but you know how dependable that is. So I remember that. And I remember my dad, he was plowing, And he plowed through an ant bed nest, and my little brother, I guess he was not probably walking and so on, and he walked and he sat down in this ant bed nest, and I rescued him. Brother, he still had a few bites and so on, but he was still wearing diapers and things like that. So I remember that poor little guy. How he got there, I don't know, but that was a real traumatic experience for me. Then, later on we moved. Then I started school, and in first grade I went. I had the appendectomy in the spring, and then I went to school in the fall. And at that time, there was only 11 grades, and that was the year they moved it up. And so all of us who were born before the end of the year got to advance a grade we went in the second grade right away rather than starting off in the first grade. But we were walking, and there were people on the road there, so we'd walk along, and we'd pick up more people as we went, and the same way was going home. Then, we'd drop off somebody here and somebody there, and we were sort of, and a number of people who lived past us too, but we always had to walk past a family that had some real vicious dogs that barked and liked to chase, and you just really needed to kind of have protection of your group together so you wouldn't get bitten or run around and so on. So that was a challenge. And of course, we always had to carry lunch to school. In school there, we played things like dodgeball and Andy Over and Rover, Red Rover, and we played hide and seek and volleyball. I think we played some volleyball probably and so on. But we had, and the first things we always had religious instruction when we started. Every morning we had religious instruction, and which was very beneficial. But it was a one-room schoolhouse, and I think it was a tremendous education because I got to listen to what all the other kids learned. And so it was really easy. But then when I got school closed and we moved, I had to go to school here in town. I had to readjust my thinking, and there were a lot of things I hadn't learned about grammar, and math was all right, but the grammar was a real problem. And then of course I liked geography. And so I started the 6th grade here in LaGrange, and at that time my parents found another place to rent, and which was at Swiss Alp, and so we moved from LaGrange to Swiss Alp, and there I went to school at a school called Washington School. It was a one-room schoolhouse too. It was a good-sized school at one time, but they were down to just one teacher in 6th grade, so I attended school there, finished a year out, and then I'm back to LaGrange. I came here in the 7th grade, and then the following year I couldn't attend. They had issues, and I had to go to Schulenburg, and then I was there for about maybe 6 or 8 weeks, because in the meantime my parents bought the place where we live now. It's an old historic farm. We called it the Manton Farm, and they were original settlers in Fayette County. They arrived here before probably in the late 1820s, early 1830s. I'm not sure just what time. And they, one of the Manton sons fought in the, not in the Texas Revolution, but he fought in this event, the Dawson Massacre. You've heard of that, Monument Hill and so on. Yes, that's where he was, and he was taken prisoner. And so it's a family. So the farm has been in only 2 families, through all these generations, from the time they arrived, and my parents acquired their property in about 1945, pardon me. And so, but anyway, this is when then we moved back, and I don't know how, accomplishing that, we didn't have all those wagons and, trailers and stuff like that. We had you'd borrow trailers, and I think, as I recall, your cattle, you would herd them along, and you'd get some people on horses to help you herd them along, and so you get them out of your pasture and you take them down the road and take the country road, and then finally you'd get to your farm, and it was a pretty good walk, you know, from Swiss-Alp to I guess about 12 miles, something like that. So that was quite a challenge. And at that time we moved into this historic old house that was built in the 1850s. It was part log cabin even, and so on. So that was a new experience. And then I started school in LaGrange in the 8th grade here after leaving Schulenburg in the 8th grade, and then I was. We had one of my famous classmate, Bill Anders. He was astronaut for Apollo 8.
Oh, okay.
And so on. So, and I think Bill is still living. He lives up in somewhere maybe Washington or somewhere or Canada. I'm not sure just where he lives.
Okay, tell us more about your famous classmates.
Well, his name was Bill Anders, and I think he grew up in California, but and his father was in the military, but they came here because his brother was here, and so they worked in a drugstore, and they purchased a drugstore. So he was here a couple of years, and then they decided the Grange was too slow for them or something or other. But anyway, they moved back to California, and he completed his education there. But he would come to some of our class reunions.
Did you have any others?
No other, not, I don't think anybody really famous. I mean, I know of some people here that were, the Granvilles here were from, you know, he was the CEO at Exxon many years ago, and he came from the Grange. And of course he's passed on too now, but he was part of a family here that I think they were well educated and very intelligent people and so on, and he must have been to be a CEO at Exxon.
Who were some of your friends that were classmates?
Classmates, okay. My friend, well, I was a Manny Schmidt, MANNIESCHMIDT, and she's still active. She lives here in town. And then my Artie Schultz, ARTIE Schultz, SCHULTZ, and she fell a couple of years ago, and so she's in a nursing home over here at Monument Hill. Then there was Myrtle Fremel, MYRTLE, and then FRIEMEL, and Myrtle is still living. Then I had another classmate, her name was Mildred Schubert, and she's passed on. As I said, most of the people that I knew we had class reunions and so on. I have to get out my annual or something like that to look at all the names, but they some died earlier. There was a Mary Lucy Robson. She died quite early. Then there was a Anna Lee Fritsch, and I think she also passed away young. And let's see, Michael Sikas, MICHAEL CZICHOS. He moved to Houston, and he got involved with people who did manufacturing in China, and so he was very involved over there in manufacturing things in China. I don't know how all that works, but and he also has passed on. As I said, there's just a handful of us that are still around.
Okay.
Let's see, Marilyn Bollmeyer, but she was my close friend, Marilyn Bollmeyer, Teresa, and she passed away a couple of years ago, and we were born just 2 months apart, and that was the neighbors, you know, so that was one of my special friends, so going back there.
Tell us about your first job.
Okay, my first job was at the Fayette County Abstract Company. It's they call it the old Masonic building. It's there on the right off the square. The 3-story building. Right now it's that. Let's see, that fruit stand is next to it. If you go down Travis Street, and on the corner is a used car sales place, and then the fruit stand is there, and then on the beyond on the corner then is that let me see, there's a dentist office there. But anyway, it's a 3-story building, and it was built in the 1880s, and that was where my job was. And what we did, the Abstract Company, what it did, we did records. We copied records from the courthouse, all the deeds and all the activities that go in the official records. You do things on judge, lawsuits filed and claims filed by people and divorces and things like that. And then they'd have these big books, and it'd be alphabetized and so on, and land transactions and all of this. And we'd do little copies. It would be like a half a page or something like that, and they each would resemble each volume in of the deed records and the oil and gas records and deed of trust records and just whatever records they have there. The courthouse is full of them. They go into digital now, I think. But you see, it was all bound, and you'd have to go back and read this. And of course, originally they were all in handwritten, and sometimes the clerk had very good handwriting, and sometimes his handwriting was not so good, and you'd have to read. So that was my job over there, and I was there several years, and then I started having a family and so on, and then finally, and that sort of led into my job. Then I worked for John C. Marburger. He was an attorney in LaGrange, and I worked for him 25 years. And so I was his right hand, and it was all right because I started when he was 50, but by the time I quit, he was, or maybe, yeah, he was near his 80s and so on. Maybe I quit when I was 50. He was, whatever it was. Anyway, he was getting in his 80s and I could not. It was too much of a challenge, overwhelming to me, because he had so many old clients, and I had to help them make decisions. And but it was an education for me. It was an education for me to do that. I learned a lot. I learned to meet a lot of good people who had issues. People just needed to have help. They had property they needed to sell, and people needed to buy land, a home, and things like that. So it was a good education. You meet a lot of fine people, and that was great. What else? Let me see.
Do you associate with a religion or church here in town?
Okay. Yes, I do. Let me go back though. After I retired from Mr. Marburger, I went to work at Monument Hill State Park in Crashy Brewery, and I worked for Mr. Marburger 25 years, and I stayed at the park for 13 years, and I retired in 1996, I think, and it was 1983 when I left Mr. Marburger, and then I was at Monument Hill, and I stayed until I turned 62.
Okay.
Then I had another career with my husband. We can talk about that later.
Well, we can go ahead.
Well, anyway, my husband farmed, so then I went and did all the, helped him with his tractor work, and I worked more around my house, and I volunteered, and I got to do all kinds of things. But I would rake hay for him, and sometimes he'd go hunting in the fall and so on, and there'd be hay on the ground, and I had to manage how to get that done and get people lined up to pick up the hay. And
what was your husband's name?
His name was Roy, and so on. So that's a whole different story again with him. I can go on about his life too if you want to.
Okay.
Well, and so I did that, and then, but he, when his age, eventually he had a lot of health problems and so on, so we spent a lot of time going to the doctor and so on, and then he passed away, and he's been gone for almost 16 years now. But it was a challenge, but the first few years were really good, you know, and I helped him with his business, and I learned how to farm and things like that, and I've had to pass all that information on to my grandchildren so they can do it now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead with the next question.
And so we were going to ask about your religion and
Religion.
values and
Yes.
Services if you attended, or successes in life, regrets in life.
Okay.
How was life?
Okay. Well, as I said, I was baptized at Trinity Hill Lutheran Church, and I was a member of that church, and we attended services regularly with my parents. I went to Sunday school there, was confirmed there, and so I was married in that church. And then we merged with the Lutheran Church here in the Grange in 1962. And so we've been, I've been attending church regularly since that time, all these years and so on. As a youngster, we participated in, we had a youth group. And then as time went on, my husband and I married, and we had children, and I taught Sunday school for a number of years, at least probably until my son didn't attend anymore. It was sort of a combination thing. But I've been on various boards at the church and volunteer there with a lot of things and so on. Right now we have a quilting group that we do regularly, and I belong to the Mary Martha Guild. And of course we have a lot of projects that we work on, so there's always something to do that. But I'm trying to delegate some of my chores, projects to other people now. Make sure that you accomplish them. And outside of the church, I've also belonged to the VFW. And after my husband passed, I joined the Grange Garden Club. And that's been a pleasure because gardening is fun, and keeping the landscape and so on. And I used to keep my lawn, and now I have to keep that lawn I have to have somebody do it. I attempted to do it this past weekend, and I can't really do it. Well, anyway, Artie Schultz, my friend, she was an active member in the garden club, and so we worked together at the Facing House. We did a lot of work around there and so on, and really kept up the landscape because somehow or another the ladies were getting older and they didn't want to do it. We still could do it, but now neither one of us can do it, and it's kind of gotten to where they're having to hire people and it's a challenge. I still go out there and try to tell them what to do, but I spent, and then I'm, still active with the with the Face and Preservation Society. I'm still active with them.
Okay.
And let me see. Oh, the Extension Homemakers. I'm a part of that too, and so on. And I sort of limited myself. I try not to do anymore because there's a limit how many times you can do things. But you get on this committee and that committee, and finally you have no time for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's,
yes.
mm-hmm.
You want to talk about your family, your children?
Oh, my children, all right. Well, my husband and we have 2 children. Nancy was born in 1956, and Don was born in 1961. Nancy has 3 sons, she has 2 grandchildren. Her oldest son is married, and he has girls, and his oldest daughter is she's a freshman at Texas A&M in school, so time moved on. There's a younger one. The middle grandson, Jason, he got married last year, and he's building his house out on the farm now, out there on the Old Plum Highway. And AJ, he's the youngest, and he's also in his mid-30s. He's still single, but he works for Hewlett-Packard in Tomball, and so they're all quite successful.
Nice.
Jason works from home. He has with an international group, and so he has to, space his time, and so sometimes he has to take a midnight shift or something like that. Okay, what else?
Any advice you have for young couples, especially here in Fayette County, if you could tell them?
Well, I've always been a conservative and so on. There's so many distractions, I can't believe it, It's sort of, I think I'm still fortunate. My friends tell me about some of their kids that have got multiple tattoos and things like that and so on. Luckily, they have sort of, I guess, they haven't done, this generation, my grandsons didn't get any tattoos and so on. They were never interested in that sort of thing. I think it was because when they were young, I took them out to the farm. And we did all kinds of things out there. They were, and I know everybody doesn't have that opportunity for something useful to do. It's so important, but we did that, and as I said, sometimes I think they were challenged with it, but I would take them. We had a truck out there in the country, and so when the oldest one, whenever he was old enough, I would let him drive, and then I would take the two little ones with me, and I would let them take turns in driving. And out in the country, we have a lot of trails out there, roads and so on. So it was very safe, and they behaved themselves real well. But that was a great experience for them.
So let's talk about the community here. Where did you shop, and how far were these shops from where you live? And tell me about if you went grocery shopping, how was that, and did you drive there?
Well, out in the country, when we lived as a child, out there, we just lived about 4 miles or 3 or 4 miles west of LaGrange. And so we would go once a week. On Saturdays you would go shopping. And that's when you'd also pick up you take your eggs to town and so, and that would be your money to buy groceries with, because you had very little resources at that time. They had floods that would destroy our crops, and the prices were very low. It was a depression, and so it was a difficult time. But nevertheless, you go to the feed store, and during the war, then we had they would put the feed, chicken feeds and things like that, in printed bags, and so we would use that to make dresses out of. And so we'd go along and maybe help, pick out a couple of things, what we liked, and then maybe you could only get so many, and then you'd have to see if you could find some more. Finally, you'd have enough to go around, and sometimes you share with your neighbors. Maybe you could trade. But shopping on the square was something different, especially during the war. As I said, everybody was there. The square was just crowded, and because we had Camp Swift, which was a training base, a bastrop. The soldiers would come over here to LaGrange, and also the young men from this area who were on furloughs, they would come on Saturday and and party up and so on. And there was this thing about street racing. I always remember this couple of guys. Well, I guess there were several, and they'd get together and so they would race around the square in their model, in their cars. It was just really awesome. It was pretty awesome. But that's when you go shopping, and all the grocery stores were around the square, and you'd have to go like the drugstore, and you'd have to find a grocery store, a clothing store, a dime store. That was all, everything was different. But you'd have several grocery stores and so on, and some, but you'd also have the five and dime, and that was where your little things were. But you'd have your dress shops and the like. And as I said, I still enjoyed that tremendously. And if you couldn't find anything here, we'd go to Austin to go shopping. And And it was pretty easy to do. Now I hate the idea about going to Austin. But I did that, you know, and even when, you know, like I say, 15 years ago and so on, or, you know, 20 years ago, my husband was in the hospital in Austin Heart several times and so on, and also, you know, I was hospitalized there too, and things like that, and it was not a problem for us to drive to Austin to shop. But otherwise, and then we use the catalog, you know, J.C. Penney, Sears.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I read that during the 1960s, LaGrange had quite a few industries such as cotton gins, hatcheries, feed mills, furniture and manufacturing plant. Can you tell us anything about those plants or?
Well, the cotton gin, yes. We had, in fact, my husband had an interest in the cotton gin. It was, I think they call it Grange Cotton Gin, and they operated a few years, and he was down there at the River Bridge. And then there was another one, it was Casper Mehawk, and they were on the north part of town. So they were, you know, but we shut down after a while, I think. Well, they weren't really raising cotton anymore around here. We had a lot of trouble with the boll weevil, and we had tremendous rain where our cotton patches turned into forests. Almost, and so on, and the like. So as far as there were furniture stores too. You know, now I think you can only buy furniture online. I don't know if there's even a furniture store around here, but we had several furniture stores. You know, especially where the Quilt Museum is. You know, that was a furniture store, and then there was on the corner where the bank is, Pioneer Bank is. That was a furniture store. And we had different ones who tried, you know, and we had ice cream shops on the square and drugstores, you know, and now all of this is gone. You know, we had several drugstores, and now we just have, I guess, Walmart and H-E-B. And see, what else did we have here? Manufacturing, well, we had the Texas timbers, you know, they were out in the country and then they moved to town, so we did have that manufacturing. And as the town grew, you know, we were not really, the local people, the powers that be here were not really acceptable to having a large manufacturing company come in for the reason that they didn't want the wages to go up. So, and that's always been a detriment because you have manufacturing in Schulenburg and Weimar and places like that. Of course, we had the county seat. Eventually, we got the LCRA over here. We have the power plant, which seems like everybody, Austin hates it, and the local people didn't like it too well either because they thought maybe the pollution and so on. So I don't. And one of my grandsons works over there now, so I can't really criticize it too much. Let me see what else we had. Well, you know, we have the local events like the fair, and I do participate in exhibits over there. I have been baking pies, and I have a lot of ribbons. And I get best of show and so on. I have them around the corner over there if you need to look at them. I do that, and you know, belong to the VFW. It's over there, but I still belong to an age club and like, but not as much anymore. It's my body does not tolerate hanging around, walking around, partying.
Mm-hmm. Okay. From the 60s to the 70s, there was a transition. How did that look here in LaGrange with the transition of things going on?
Well, you know, we had integration, and that probably occurred in the early 60s. You know, we integrated the schools, and we integrated everything at one time. My daughter was a part of that, and so on, and education, you know, I don't know if anybody gets education right because it has to change, but sometimes it changes for the worse and sometimes for the better and so on, and they try different methods. You know, they put all the what do you call it, less advanced students in one group and another group and so on. Then they decided that didn't work, so then they mixed them up again. Oh yes, and that was when the girls had to have their dresses had to be a certain length, and that was always a challenge. Poor kids, they would get sent home and things like that. And you'd have to check that dress length every. If they grew a half an inch, then the dress was probably too short. So when my son went to school, we didn't have those issues.
Okay.
And they, let me see, what else? Oh, anyway, I guess that's enough, okay.
Okay. Do you miss anything about the way it used to be? What kinds of things from the past would you like to see as a way of life today?
Well, after I retired, we did traveling, and we had a travel club here, and we went frequently, and I miss that. That was a lot of fun. I did enjoy traveling. It was very nice, and the one year I went to, in the year 2000, I went to Switzerland with a group, and we had a lot of people. I think we had like 2 busloads of people from the Grange go. It was a tremendous thing. And then one year I went to Hawaii, and that was pretty nice. We flew to Hawaii, and then we got on a cruise ship, and we went from Hawaii to some island and way out in the Pacific and so on. But then, where they were very primitive and so on, and then after that we'd have to get off of the cruise ship and get on these little boats. And then one year I went to Canada, and one year my husband and I, and some of this I did alone, but a year my husband and I won some plane tickets, and we went to Western Canada, Victoria and so on, and Seattle, Washington, and that was a wonderful, wonderful trip. It was so nice. And so, but I enjoyed my trip to Canada because they were a little further behind in their things, and you watch the tide, how the tide would be going. We drive around and the tide was coming in, and then about the time later in the day it'd be going back out again, and it's just amazing what the world is like. I've seen a bunch of it, but not nearly enough. And I bet next week, my daughter, they're going out to do the eclipse in the hill country, and then they're going to go to Big Bend. And I've been to Big Bend several times, and that is quite impressive. You can be there, drive for 4 days. I mean, it gets kind of boring because it's sort of the same old thing. It's kind of like East Texas when you see one pine tree, you've seen them all. But it's interesting.
Okay, how has technology changed in your lifetime?
Well, very much, because I remember just having the manual typewriter, and then we had something that was a little more advanced. It had memory in it, and then now we have computers, and I'm already on my 3rd computer. And I still don't know more. I know less now than I did when I first started about computers. They keep trying to force this other technology on me. Have you ever turned on the computer and there's something different on the screen than what you're looking for, and you got to figure out how to click it off so you can go do what you want to do? It amazes me, and it's beyond comprehension. Now they talk about artificial intelligence. And I can't even begin to think about what that's like. I just have to trust that somebody knows what they're doing.
Do you remember your first contact with the radio or TV?
Yes, I do.
Tell us about that.
Well, my parents had a radio, and it was big. Look at over there. See the little cabinet over there? There was a radio in there,
here.
right? And after after they didn't use it anymore, my mother had some furniture made out of it, and so on, and put it on legs because it sat on the floor, and there was a amplifier, and where the little spokes are now. There was an amplifier there. I suppose is what it was. I think that little glass, that was a dial, and so on. But we wouldn't listen to the radio all day long, but just listen to it maybe Saturday maybe a Saturday night we listened to the Grand Ole Opera is what we listened to. And maybe Sunday morning we listened to the Chugwagon Gang. I think they played on Sunday mornings maybe. But otherwise you were busy working, you know. I mean, I always said I have cow milking hands, you know, and we miss this in experiences, but when I was probably about 14 or something like that, my parents both got sick. My dad was a dairy person, and so on. He farmed, but he wanted to have so we always had cows, you know, to sell, and milk to sell and so on. So anyway, he got sick. He got the flu, and my mother, I guess she was sick too, and so on. So I went to the neighbor to help because we had about 8 or 10 cows to milk, and that's a bunch of milking, at least for a 14-year-old. And my brother, but you know, he was too young yet, and so hadn't matched the situation. But I walked to his house and got him to come and help me. But by the time I don't guess he never learned how to milk a cow or something. He was such an ordeal. I just, you know, I thought to myself, you know, I really think I can do this myself and not bother him anymore. But that went on for a couple of days. By that time, my dad recovered. And he started milking again, but that was a challenge, you know. But like but it's something I learned early on. But cows can be temperamental; they can kick and and so on. And they're pretty. You know, they're calm, and some something bugs them, and they go ahead and they don't mind kicking you, and you better be careful. They knock that bucket over and so on. But later on, he had milking machines and things like that, and then we had a dairy barn, and didn't have all of that thing. And then I got married and so on, and and I always I helped my husband a little bit, But anyway, I always had a job. I worked at Abstract Company, and then I worked for Mr. Marburg, and then I worked for Parks and Wildlife, and then I started a whole new career. And now I have another one, and haven't figured out what it's going to be. We had traffic, intersection over here. Highway 77 and Highway 71 in the intersection. They came through LaGrange, and there was no other way around. And it was a challenge. And then we had the railroad track, and you'd have a train on the railroad track and so on. You have an emergency, and emergency vehicles are on one side of the track, and the emergencies on the other side, and things like that. But then now we have the bypass, and so on. And that was a real challenge because it took a long time. But we went to these meetings and things like that, and we listened to people, and there were, most people. There was one man who said, well, I don't care where you build it, just tell me where you're going to put it, because he was in the restaurant business and so on, and he wanted to be sure he would be at the right place. And that was important, and then we came, got the airport. We had this little bitty airport that really supported Cottonwoodian. That was, it's where the, it's a Mexican restaurant now. But but the people would fly there, and because they had big steaks, and it was wonderful food. It really was. And nothing tastes that good anymore. But that must be me. I don't know. Big steak and things like that. and so, but we got the airport, and that was out there at my, across from my husband where his home was. But the traffic on 71. Was just tremendous, and it used to be so bad that it would really stack up, all the way to Plum. It would be 3 or 4 miles out of LaGrange, That was on, holidays and big weekends, and especially when there was a game either in Austin or vice versa, whatever it was. And so it's good to have the bypass now. But it was very hard on my mother-in-law because they didn't make her move. Now, my mother, she lived on the other side of the road, and she had, she needed to move. But before all of that transpired, she had a stroke and passed away, and so on. So now, that was a movement. So those are things that came, and like adjusting to the power plant and all of its combinations. But we also went through this period, where people are looking for some project they'd like to have that may not be good. And we had a group from down there in Columbus who wanted to build a dam at Columbus and flood all this valley and so on. And but anyway, some of the local citizens got together and they finally convinced them that what is it, the forgotten the name of the bureau, but anyway, they convinced them that it was not feasible because it would, and it's a good thing they didn't, because we've had the droughts here sometimes. You know how Lake Travis, it's only 33% full, but we've had a lot of rain down here. We probably have it full down here now. But a lot of things have changed, and the fact the things that have, things have changed because of the amount of water that comes down the Colorado River, and so we don't have rice fields anymore, and so on. So we don't have ducks and geese flying here. The cranes, still cranes fly because they go down to the coast, but the ducks and geese who would, they winter over like in El Campo and places like that. They're not there anymore. They I don't know how they figure that out, but anyway, I think they go like to Louisiana, where they still have, where they have rice fields and things like that. But things like that have changed, and automation and so on. And like I say, I'm so grateful we have a washing machine and a dryer and electricity and things like that. It's fantastic, because I grew up with a lamp, and so on. And you sort of didn't, and no TV. And so, but I remember we got our first TV, and we invited friends from out in the country to come over and watch TV with us.
What were some of the shows on TV that you first saw?
What?
Some of the first shows on TV.
Well, there were the soap operas, and I don't know. The Young and the Restless, I think, is still on. I gave it up watching after my husband passed away. He liked to watch them, and to me, I said, that's kind of a useless thing. They recycle these people. They've got more drama in their life. But basically, I'm a conservative, and I think and I still am, and it bothers me that things cost so much now. I have, the grocery store, the gas, and so on, and nothing is. It's so uneven. It's not. It does, and I don't know how it's going to get rebalanced, because I feel like it concerns me that the next generation will not be able to own any property anymore, I believe. It's going to be out of sight. And that's not right. I don't know how that's, you get that sense. But like over here, everything has gotten, land over here is $10,000 an acre, $15,000 an acre. Now, who can afford that? What kind of a job do you need? It does. I mean, I'm comfortable with because I save money and so on, and I have some investments and they keep me going, and things like that. But I really feel for people, because But I realize some people make tremendous amounts of money. And they go to the nail shop and they've got toenails painted and but having but I do and that's fine and good. I've just never had the desire to really have my fingernails painted. The toenails I have gotten where because I have all these other issues with my back and legs and so on, and so I do go to go see go have a pedicure once in a while. Just plain, let them. But I can still do a pretty good job. One just has to remember to do that at the right time. There's a lot of learning. When you get out after you've had your shower, you just go ahead and you start trimming off as much. Get yourself a good clippers and trim off as much as you can. You smooth it out and what have you, and it works pretty good, I don't know how your life runs and so on. I mean, but I miss, now I miss having the physical ability to do things. I see things out here, and I need to do them, and I can't, even getting my groceries in and so on, I have to put them on a little truck and things like that because I can't carry a whole lot. My back won't tolerate it. But I still volunteer and do all kinds. And once I get started, it's okay, but then I have to rest. So I spend a lot of time on the couch. I have a pillow over there. The couch is the best place to rest.
I agree.
Now you mentioned the fairs earlier.
Oh, okay.
What were the celebrations, parades, and festivals like back? Because
Well, we used to have parades. My, as I said, the history, like my husband was in the military and so on, and his father, played in the band, and they marched. I have a picture of them playing at on the courthouse steps and so on. There was a lot of activity going on, but the Grange we don't have a parade anymore. I think except maybe now we have it for the fair.
What has given you the most satisfaction in life?
I guess the fact that I'm a Christian and I know that as bad as things are, the Lord will always see me through. It's a calming effect, and sometimes you just need to stop and pray, and it does help. I mean, and that was something my husband, neither of us were just, very open or religious and so on, but we had our faith and we trusted. And even though, as bad as it seems, I know I had a minister say this now, but don't forget the Lord's still in charge, and just, knowing that I have a Savior and I'm saved makes me feel better.